While his first wife Khadijah was alive, Muhammad was monogamous. That he came to have many wives is not in itself controversial. This was a common practice for rulers in ancient and medieval times. Collecting wives was a way to solidify alliances with the surrounding rulers and kingdoms, and a way to avoid trouble. If the king next door's daughter is one of your wives, then he's a relative of yours. He doesn't want harm to come to his daughter. Historians believe that at the time of his death, Muhammad had either 9 or 11 wives, as well as 2 concubines, which were given to him as gifts. Historian F.E. Peters says that it's hard to make generalizations about Muhammad's marriages. He says that, quote, many seem to have been political, some compassionate, some, perhaps Aisha or Zainab, affairs of the heart, end quote. Islamic teachers sometimes emphasize that Aisha was the only virgin Muhammad married, and that all but Aisha and one of the concubines had been previously married, even Khadijah, who had been married twice before. In the words of one commenter, this shows, quote, the importance and care that needs to be given to lone women in Islamic society, as against the then prevalent norm of casting them off to a life of destitution, end quote. Devout Muslims, then, will hold up these marriages of Muhammad as a sign of his compassion. It is true that this would be a step up for most of them in wealth and status. It's a big deal to be married to the undisputed ruler of the community. And it's also true that in maybe a couple of cases, he married the widows of people killed in battle, and some of them were not exactly young women anymore. The most interesting of Muhammad's wives is Aisha. She was the daughter of his friend and companion Abu Bakr, who we'll meet in the next lecture. According to hadith reports that are traced back to Aisha, Muhammad became engaged to her when she was 6, and she became his wife at 9, and he would have been in his early 50s at the time. Those aren't the only dates that are given in the sources. Sometimes they say 7, 9, 10, and some Islamic apologists will argue that she must have been in her mid-teens or even in her mid-20s. But that's not what the mainstream says. Also, many will assume and assert that the marriage was not consummated until she reached puberty. I'm not aware of any source that says that. In Islamic law, as elsewhere, marriage is understood to imply sex. It's understood to imply a consummation of the marriage. Needless to say, this has been fuel for controversy in recent times, with Christian apologists and atheist critics making a lot of it. But it wasn't that controversial back then. You have to keep in mind that in many societies, a woman is considered to be of marriageable age as soon as she reaches puberty. Part of the reason for the controversies in recent times is because this has been considered a precedent. There have been many cases in traditional Islamic countries of middle-aged men marrying young teens or even preteens. In any case, some sources say that Aisha was Muhammad's favorite wife, and that she was about 18 when he died in her arms after a short illness. That then is how Muhammad died. He died rather unexpectedly after a short illness. We don't know what, although various modern writers have speculated about what conditions or diseases he might have suffered from. Aisha is important to Islamic history because many hadith reports are attributed to her. But she was caught up in the power struggles after Muhammad's death. There was some accusation of immorality against her. This is mentioned in Surah 24 in the Quran. And this accusation, it's unclear what it was, but this was believed by Ali. Consequently, she and Ali were bitter enemies, and she actually ended up leading troops into battle against his troops. The only marriage of Muhammad that was really controversial during his lifetime was to the ex-wife of his freed slave and adopted son. It seems that Zayd willingly divorced her so that she could marry Muhammad at the urging of a divine revelation. This is controversial, and there are various versions of this story, but some versions say that he saw her and thought she was beautiful, and soon after received a divine revelation that she was to become his wife, and that because of that, his adopted son divorced her, and apparently she agreed. That's not hard to imagine because, again, it would be a big rise in status to be a wife of the Prophet. Based on Surah 4 in the Quran, in general, a Muslim man may have up to 4 wives, so long as he can treat 4 wives justly. It doesn't quite explain that, but commentators will elaborate much on that. If you can't really handle having 4 and treating them well, then you shouldn't have that many. This rule, though, doesn't apply to the Prophet. In Surah 33, there's a revelation that allows Muhammad more than 4 wives as he pleases. Although he is there forbidden from marrying more wives, although not, it says, from acquiring more concubines. In our next lecture, Islamic history and the many sects within Islam.